DJ PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone, and we are joined now by Mike Folta, Utah Mammoth radio voice. Mike, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. Catching me right before we hop on a jetliner to cross the country and say hello to New York. We'll be in the Empire State for the ball drop, which will be pretty fun. But in the meantime, we're keeping up on all the Kyle Whittingham analysis. And look, our play-by-play guy on TV, Matt McConnell, is a huge Michigan State fan. And he had all the respect in the world for Kyle Whittingham. But then once he saw that maize and blue at the press conference, it broke his heart. It broke his heart because he had come to like Kyle, and now he is obliged to root against him as a Spartan. So at least somebody on the broadcast team feels very strongly about the move. I'm sure you guys and a lot of the listeners do as well. But strange times in the Utah sports landscape.
Kyle loved on a night off in the spring to go down and sit behind the glass and watch guys skate into each other and just blast each other into the boards. He's here for all the physicality and all the big hits you can provide.
He does. We had a bunch of stars at the game last night as well. We had Bubba Watson, two-time Masters champion, at the game last night. I believe Lowry Markkinen and Coach Will Hardy were there for the Jazz as well. They like to come quite often. So, yeah, it's been a who's who at the Delta Center for Mammoth games recently.
Yeah, I would guess you would see Kyle at Detroit to watch the Red Wings because he has long since been a hockey fan, and talking to him, he was excited to have the team here. My guess is that he will follow them from a distance because he's been to several games and he is a hockey guy. And the great thing now for us is that college football obviously ends here. The Utes finish up. There'll still be off the field stuff with coaching and whatnot and the transfer portal, as you know. But now, to me, now's the time we turn our attention and we really, really start to dig into this team to see what they're going to do this year. And immediately, right off the bat, I can argue of all the stretches of the season, January could be the most important.
I mean, you nailed it. You nailed it, PK. Like it is kind of a put up or shut up month for the Utah Mammoth. They call this stretch in the NHL like the dog days of the season a little bit. You're kind of right in the middle. You can't see the end. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel quite yet. But Utah's next game will be the halfway point of the season. And we've got 15 games in the month of January coming up, including 3 in New York and New Jersey to start off. We'll play the New York Islanders on New Year's Day, and then we'll play the New Jersey Devils and the New York Rangers at Madison Square Garden. But a 7-game homestand coming up in January for this team as well. And this is a big homestand coming up for a team that hasn't played a lot of home games. The Mammoth, entering last night's home game against Nashville, Mammoth had played the fewest home games out of anybody in the entire league. So that's been a big disadvantage for this group. And now that starts to swing back in your favor, where you are playing some more of these home games coming up in January, February, and March, you got to find a way to take advantage of that. Mammoth weren't able to do that last night. They fell 4-3 to Nashville. But I think back to last year when things started to get harder and harder for Utah, and the Mammoth had a 7-game homestand last year, and they had a losing record. They went 3-4 during that homestand. So they didn't really capitalize on any momentum in that stretch that you would get from being home. Now, they had some injuries in last year's homestand. They lost Dylan Gunther. They lost Logan Cooley during that stretch of games. So they were fighting that battle from an injury perspective. But nobody's feeling bad for you in the NHL, and everybody's going to experience injuries at some point throughout the year. And so this 7-game homestand coming up that we'll get to in the middle of January is going to be a huge stretch for this team. And the month as a whole is going to be big. Utah is basically playing every other day. There's a couple of stretches of rest in there, but it's going to be a great opportunity for the Mammoth to climb into a wild card spot. They're only a game out right now. But if you start to slip in January, things can pile up on you quickly. And they did a little bit for Utah last year where you saw a couple teams kind of sneak up and put themselves in between the Mammoth and that playoff spot.
What happens in the last 10 minutes of a game when one slips away? Is it a lack of concentration? Is it just key mistakes? Are there flaws in the team being revealed? Because it looked like everything was going right and then suddenly it was going wrong.
Yeah, I mean, last night is what you're talking about when Nashville scores twice in the span of a minute and a half to take the lead in the third period. And really, nobody was sweating in the Delta Center all night. Like Utah was in front or it was tied for the whole game, but the Mammoth couldn't find a way to get that next goal, and they never made it a 2-goal game. And I think that is part of the story, DJ, where the Mammoth did let it slip away and they allowed those 2 goals in the third. I kind of look at it from the opposite side where Utah failed to score. They failed to extend the lead. The Mammoth had just so many chances in last night's game to extend the lead and to make it a 2-goal game. And they never once could do that. And it was everybody, right? Like everybody had opportunities. Nick Schmaltz had a bunch. The rookie Daniil Boot had some good looks in tight. But for whatever reason, the Mammoth weren't able to execute. And that's what you heard from guys in the postgame media scrums, weren't able to execute and finish. And maybe you can expect that a little bit in the first game back from Christmas. You know, you're all full of eggnog and Christmas cookies and the like. But the execution on the offensive end was just off a little bit. But this is something that this team has to figure out. The Mammoth have blown I think the second most leads in the NHL at this point. And so finding ways to finish games and be confident playing with the lead is something that winning teams are able to do. And that's something that this team is still trying to find a way to do this season.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, that's it. You listen to the Bear Torney talk about that, and it sort of seems like a broken record a little bit, and he was going off on that against following the Nashville game. And so the word that comes to mind, I think that he's been using, and I can see why he's using it, is frustrating, because they're there to be able to put themselves in that position that you speak of, but not quite getting to where they need to be. It's close. It's tantalizing. You can see it. It's not way down the road. It's like right in front of your face. And, and then Cooley's goes down and that's a blow. And it just seems like there's a level of frustration, and they've got to find a way to just break through and get on the other side of it. And it seems it's like Phil Mickelson, he had to find a way to win the major, and he was trying, and he was there. Once he got it, he leaps in the air. He had that 4-inch vertical leap that has become famous when he made that putt at Augusta. And then he goes on and he wins a few more, right? And so there needs to be that breakthrough. How do they go about, or what do they need to get that breakthrough? Because it's there to be had.
Yeah. I think the golf analogy is a good one, and mentioned Bubba Watson being at the game last night at the Delta Center. I think back to his shot at the Masters. I can't remember, would this have been 2014 where he hits it out of the pine straw? And I think he plays he was it a slice that he played, or he had some crazy angle to hit it out of the pine straw, out of trouble, and get it to a safe area and have a chance at par. But it's the plays like that where you just have to make a play. Like there's no analytics that are going to make you feel any better at the end of the day. You have to find a way to get it done. Comes down to execution. I think poise, just like we talk about this last year a lot, haven't talked about it this year as much because I think the team's been better at it, but managing games and being poised in those crucial moments. Utah took a penalty in the third period last night that led to the game tying goal from Steven Stamkos, who's one of the great goal scorers of our league. And I mentioned analytics not making you feel any better, but I am still going to try here for a second, because we get the numbers, the broadcast team, we get the numbers from our friends over at SportLogic. And one of the numbers that they give us is expected goals, which is a little bit hocus pocus, but it does kind of give you a snapshot into who controls the game. And the expected goals is basically the analytics community just telling you how many goals they expected you to score based on your scoring chances, based on where they came from, based on, the quality of those chances. Utah was expected to score twice as many goals as Nashville last night. Utah was expected to score like 4.5. Nashville was expected to score 2. And to put that, like, if you're not familiar in the hockey analytics world, I'm going to put it in like football terms. Say you double up a team in yardage, right? You double up a team in yardage, you're expected to win that game, right? But turnovers and penalties, things like that can totally negate the yardage stat at times. And that's kind of what we had last night. Utah was the better team. And if they play that game 10 times, Utah probably wins 7 or 8 of those games. But Nashville is an experienced team. They've got guys like Steven Stamkos, who's a legendary goal scorer. They've got guys like Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly, who have been doing this for a long time. And those guys stuck with their game and came through in the big moments, whereas the Mammoth are still trying to figure that part out.
In all those analytics, are there any parts of the game, are they a little short everywhere and that's the thing, or is there one part of the game where there's something you look at and think that's got to get better? There's a big gaping hole here and they got to improve.
Ooh, that's hard to say. It's hard to say, DJ. Like, I think this team has played really well the last couple of weeks, and we're saying that. And in the 12 games without Logan Cooley, Utah is now 4-8, which is not good. Like, that record's objectively bad.
Right.
And yet, in most of those games without Cooley, without your most dynamic offensive player, you're walking away and thinking, like, man, like, we played pretty well. We lost to LA. We lost to Florida the first couple games without Cooley. We played pretty well against good teams, just came up short by 1 goal. I think DJ, one area that we were focusing on the broadcast last night are 1-goal games. Like, the Mammoth do not have a great record in 1-goal games. They're like right at 500, which, okay, it's not terrible, but you'd like to see that be better. Whereas Nashville was a team that's below Utah still in the standings, and yet they have a positive record in 1-goal games. Like, they find ways to pull those out late. And I attribute that a lot to their age and experience, where Utah is still a younger team. Mammoth have a bunch of cup winners on this roster. So you'd like to think that this group can figure this out a little bit better than what they have so far. But you think of the guys who are driving the play, especially offensively for Utah, the guys who are out there in the big moments, guys like Dylan Guenther, Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley when he's healthy, JJ Peterka, those guys are pretty young still. And so even though the Mammoth do have a lot of cup winning experience, most of that's on the back end. They're defensemen. They don't have as much of the experience up front with the forwards. So it's hard to put a finger on it, but winning these 1-goal games is something that you're going to have to start doing here, especially against divisional opponents, because the schedule is not going to get any easier opponent wise for Utah. The schedule is going to get easier in terms of rest and recovery, things like that, and travel. But you're going to be playing a whole bunch of divisional games throughout the next few months. And a lot of those are going to be tight games. We've seen a ton of tight games in the NHL this season. And winning those close ones, especially when it's tight late, when you grip the stick a little bit tighter, when everybody is a little bit more aware, that's when you've got to buckle down and find a way to at least earn a point.
We've got situation at goaltending. What is the plan going forward, short-term, long-term, rest of season?
Yeah, so Vitek Vanacek was put on IR, and the rule with injured reserve is that you have to be out a week, essentially, and he was put on IR. Karel Vejmelka. I don't know. I might have said Vitek Vanacek.
Yeah,
Karel Vejmelka was put on IR.
Yeah.
And but that was retroactive to the 23rd. So that's when it starts. So today's the 30th. So he's eligible to play in Utah's next game, which is coming up on New Year's Day. So he was skating at practice, and we're not sure exactly what the injury is. Hockey people love to be mysterious about injuries, and goalies are known for being a little weird, so maybe they're being extra mysterious. But we saw Carell, Utah's number one goaltender, at practice skating, so that leads me to believe that it's not overly serious, and I wouldn't be surprised if he plays sooner rather than later, even as early as Utah's next game. Again, not sure the severity or the nature of the injury, but he was practicing. Didn't look like there was anything wrong with him, just from a bystander's perspective. So would expect Utah's bell cow to be back in soon.
Is it really the case you think of the team is good, but you take a dynamic player like Cooley off it, and they just don't have the depth to replace him, whereas another team, a better team, might?
Yeah, I think you look at the contenders, and that's certainly the cup contenders.
Yeah,
and that's certainly the case, right? They just have more of that star power compared to a Utah team. But again, I kind of alluded to it. Like, I think the team has played really well without Logan Cooley. And I think one thing we've seen is Dylan Guenther, Utah's other like really young star, has kind of stepped up in Cooley's absence. We actually saw this last year in a few games where Guenther was playing and Cooley wasn't. Guenther stepped up and was scoring goals. And one thing you'll notice, and just keep an eye out for this while you watch Mammoth games, Guenther plays a little bit more straight line and attempts fewer skilled plays, skilled passes when Cooley's out of the lineup. And I think because when Cooley's in the lineup, him and Guenther both have so much skill, they play together. Sometimes they can try and do a little too much. It seems that they're looking for that highlight reel play, that tic-tac-toe passing play to walk the puck into the back of the net. Whereas when Cooley's out, you see Guenther kind of just put his nose down a little bit more and play harder and play a little bit grittier maybe. And that's been working for him because he's scored, I believe it's 7 goals now without Logan Cooley in the lineup. And he has scored 8 goals in the month of December here, which is actually tied for a team record in terms of goals in a calendar month. So Dylan Guenther has elevated his play without Logan Cooley. Another element to that, DJ, is that Nick Schmaltz, who's traditionally been a winger, has moved over to center, and he's played really well at center, which is a harder position to play than wing. There's typically more defensive responsibilities. I would compare it to like being a middle linebacker as opposed to an outside linebacker. You're a little bit more involved, and maybe that's not a perfect one-for-one comparison, but there are more responsibilities as a center, and Schmaltz has taken that on really well, kind of filling that number one center role that Logan Cooley has left vacant. And Utah doesn't have great center depth as a team compared to other playoff teams. But I still like the way that Jack McBain and Barrett Hayden, 2 more centers on the second and third lines, have played behind Schmaltz, because those guys, they win a lot of battles. They do a lot of the little things. Jack McBain was in one kind of mood last night. I mean, he was hitting everything that moves. If he would have seen PK on the glass, he probably would have broken through it and given him a jolt or something like that. But he was hitting everybody, and he does more than that too. He provides offense, and he wins faceoffs. So I think without Logan Cooley, Utah is definitely less dynamic and less scary off the rush and in the offensive zone. But Nick Schmaltz has stepped up, and Dylan Guenther has stepped up as well.
Speaking of McBain, there was a lot of pushing and shoving going on. It seemed like every couple of minutes you're on the verge of something, and then it's just really, just a lot of talk and hugging each other and whatnot. I'm wondering, is that a level of maybe a little bit of a frustration, or was just as in the game presented itself to have it be where these guys are just touching each other like they were?
Oh, I think it was just too much time with the family over Christmas.
Is that what it was?
The guys were all wound up from all the warm and fuzzy family time over the Christmas break. They needed to hit something.
Okay.
But I think a lot of that had to do with Nashville too. That's a very prickly Nashville team, and the Mammoth weren't going to get pushed around. That's for sure. You saw McBain in the middle of it a lot. You saw Sean Dursey in the middle of it a lot. It was a really fun hockey game, and Dursey told us as much on the radio. Mammoth just couldn't find a way to come up with a result.
Mike, we'll leave it right there. Enjoy that plane flight to the Big Apple. You're going to be able to unpack, set up shop there in Gotham for a few days.
Yeah, I got my Depends with me when I make it over to Times Square to check out the ball drop. So if you see,
I'll be watching, man.
Screaming with the
do something. Do something to stand out because they always pan the crowd.
I'll bring a Kyle Whittingham jersey or a poster or something like that. How about that?
Nice.
Go blue. You don't like the blue either.
Yeah,
You're
right.
a Purdue guy.
Oh yeah. Look, Kyle Whittingham at Michigan will never lose to Purdue. Like, that is the last guy I want to see in Ann Arbor. He's going to steamroll us for a decade. But no, enjoy it, guys, and we'll see you here in a couple weeks when the Mammoth are back home.
Never say never. That's what people used to say about Indiana, and look at the Hoosiers now. You never know, Mike. You never know.
Don't get my hopes up.
Okay, all right. Take a break. When we come back, we're giving away Utah Jazz tickets to see the Dallas Mavericks. Stick around for that on the other side of this break. Mike's appearance is presented by Hercules First Federal Credit Union. At Hercules are celebrating the everyday victories. Hercules First Federal Credit Union, growing stronger together. Stay with us. DJ PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It is a Utah Jazz Ticket Tuesday. Caller 12. 801-575-ZONE wins a pair of tickets to watch the Utah Jazz take on the Dallas Mavericks January 8th at the Delta Center. Yak will take your calls. Caller 12 right now, 801-575-ZONE. If you don't win now, more tickets coming up at 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, every hour, all day long on the half hour. PK, we were scheduled to have Isaiah Holt join us, publisher of Wolverine Wire and host of Locked On Wolverines. I was hoping for a little insight from him onto the coaching staff there at Michigan and who might be staying and who might be going. There were reports yesterday that Tony Alford, the running backs coach and run game coordinator for Michigan, is going to be one of the coaches retained. So that's one piece of the puzzle right there. We know Kyle has pretty tight long-term relationships with several guys, the coordinators. That's been pretty well talked about. Coordinators usually get to bring somebody. So tight ends coach, offensive line coach, OC obviously. You fans are thinking about who might be going. And at BYU, the same thing. If Jay Hill, waiting for an official announcement, if Jay Hill is the guy, who might he take with him? You want to crawl too far out on that branch, or is that too unpredictable and no point in it?
I think it's unpredictable to an extent. I think guys will be having opportunities, and then they have to weigh, as anybody would in any situation, right? Very few people, unless it's some type of family business or what have you, they get a job and then they stay there. The sports editor for the Casa Grande Dispatch, when I was there in the 80s, he was like 30 years old, and it was his first job. He was probably there 4 or 5 years. He literally stayed the entire time and recently retired. I mean, that's highly, highly unusual. But if you're happy, and he must have been, I couldn't wait to get out of there. Nothing again, no offense against the people that were there. I just had bigger visions of what I wanted to do with myself, and certainly it's worked out from that perspective. I'm very fortunate, but not everybody maybe wanted to go because you have a family. It's not just yourself, and you have to weigh all these things. And so I know of guys who have been contacted, who have opportunities, and they're in the decision-making process. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Aaron Roderick had that opportunity, but then he's got away. Okay. In earlier portions, he had jobs. I think it was at BYU and then Washington, and he accepted them and then backed out of them. Particularly with the Washington deal, I think Sarkisian was there. He had younger kids, right? Well, now I know he's got a daughter in college because I've talked to him about it, and he's got a son who's a teenager, probably around 15 or 16. I've met him when he was a younger boy. So they're growing up. So does that open up opportunities? But, man, my gosh, I am extremely loyal, speaking from him as if I were him, to Kalani Sitake. And the one thing that I've heard from several coaches at BYU is they absolutely love working for Sataki because he's as genuine as it gets, right? Doesn't mean he can't make tough decisions because he has made tough decisions. But if you're doing well, he's going to empower you big time, right? And you're going to be able to, particularly from the coordinator perspective, to have a lot of control. So you have to weigh, do I want to go here? I got a really, really good thing here. Would I be more comfortable over there? Possibly, maybe. So you have to see that, right? And that's not that big of a move for him. I mean, he literally would stay in the same house. I was with Scotty and Hans yesterday, and I was telling them a story that 2 years ago when they were first in the conference and we had that thrilling game that was literally right at the end and Mark Harlan does his thing, that Aaron Roderick and his son walked home from the stadium. That's how close he lives, right? He didn't go back to Provo with the team because his home is in the Salt Lake area. So he walked home. So you have to figure all that stuff out. Then you throw in the Michigan thing. You take a guy like Jim Hardy. You know, he wasn't from Utah, right? He came with Christensen from Laramie. That was many years ago. And he's got, at the time he had younger boys. Well, they've grown up here, man. This is their home. Did they want to move them out of that situation? Because he could probably stay at Utah for a good while. But then it depends too, because if Jason Beck goes, which I think is probably going to happen, that they bring in a new coordinator, or does Morgan give Jim an opportunity, you know? So all those things go into it. And I don't know, I'd be lying if I sat here and said, well, I know what those guys are thinking right down to the end. I don't. All those things factor into it. I think in short order, though, that Kyle will have his staff and it'll be off and running, and then we'll go from there.
Kyle needs to get his staff together pretty quickly. The transfer portal's opening Friday. And
everybody does.
And it's going to be on, and people want to know who they're playing for. Right, yeah, everybody needs to sort it out. People want to, players are going to want to know who they're playing for, and, you know, it's not like everything has to happen on the second, but stuff is happening, and you don't want to get left behind.
And I think Bruce Feldman put out Sean Nua as a potential candidate D coordinator for BYU, anticipating that Jay Hill will follow Kyle, and obviously they have a long relationship. Well, the D coordinator for SC just left to take the job at Penn State, where he played and was an all-10 DB, if I remember correctly, all Big Ten, I should say. And so does now Nua stay there and have that opportunity? What does Lincoln Riley want to do? So
we play this game like it's a three-sided puzzle with Michigan, Utah, and BYU, but there's other schools involved. There's other dominoes falling. And people may have their phones ring, especially once you're on the radar. You know, somebody has an opening somewhere, and they're like, hey, there's some uncertainty there. Maybe he's available and he wouldn't normally be available. So,
right. And Sean Noah's been in coaching for a good long while. I remember him as a player. I believe he was a junior college player from Arizona. I remember talking to him about it back a long time ago, and he's gone out there. And you guys got like Vic Suoto, man. He's been in coaching forever too, and he was great to us when the team stunk. Every Monday, BYU would give us a player, and he was a senior, and I think he probably may have already graduated or had one class or whatever, and he'd come on every Monday, it seemed. And back in the studio, I think we were at KFAN at the time. And so he's been in coaching, and he went has some experience with Bronco. And Kalani now, you know, the longer you're in the business, the more relationships you make. And so what does he do there? I think the good thing for both programs is the programs are in good spots. You cannot argue that, right? Obviously, Kalani has done an incredible job, as has Jay Hill, as has Aaron Roderick, Fesi Zataki, Gennaro Guilford. Go down the list, right? I've always said, if you're going to hammer guys when they lose, you have to praise them when they win. You can't have one without the other, right? And BYU has been winning a whole lot of football games, and those guys have done very well. So they're in a position of strength. It's not desperation. Well, you look at Utah, man, they're 10-2, and That is really good. And I suspect they're going to be finishing 11-2. That's a top 15 program in the country. I think we don't slot them as a top 5, but I've got no problem slotting them as a top 15 program under Kyle Whittingham. We'll see what happens with Morgan Scalley, and hopefully for them, they can continue it. But they're dealing from a position of strength here also, as much strength as you can have, because things change all the time. And so the point I'm making is that it should be attractive spots when they have these openings, and they will have openings, I believe, this year, but they are coming at it from a position of strength, not desperation here, right? Remember a couple years ago when we were down there at practice and one of their guys said, my whole goal in taking this job is to make sure these guys are employed come January. Well, doesn't that seem like that was 20 years ago, man? Think about it. Now, that was just a couple years ago. Well, now, my gosh, these guys are locked in. They've had a ton of success. So mission accomplished there. That's how quick things can go. They were coming off that losing season, right? And we were wondering, what was it going to be? Well, man, BYU has answered the bell 2 seasons in a row with great years, and now they're so solid. Utah had it, got away for a second, but then they got it right back, and away they go, and they're dealing from a position of strength also.
It is funny how that quote just 2 years ago, everything gets turned on its head. And that got repeated to me. It probably got repeated to you too. It got repeated to me a year later. And that was the goal, and now keep it rolling. But when you do keep it rolling, then look at the opportunities that come. Penn State and Michigan have come calling for the Utah and BYU coaches. And we were sitting here in October talking about the season, and that wasn't on our radar. And now here we sit, and look what the last month's been like, the last couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah, it's been unprecedented with potential upheaval and actual upheaval. Kalani Sitake now has made a name, and Kalani is reaching Kyle length approval and love by the national media. And I mean, you look at Kalani, right? He's a lovable dude. He's a teddy bear kind of guy. He's built that way, right? Basically, as he was shoving the Pop-Tarts into his mouth, he's a couth Rick Majerus, right?
Yeah.
Majerus was vile in that way, right? And Kalani makes fun of himself in the way that Majerus did, but Majerus was crass and crude and all that stuff, but one fine basketball coach. Make no mistake about that. He and I mud wrestled for a decade, and I believe he had this for me, but I certainly had it for him in terms of respect of why he was hired to win basketball games. He wasn't hired to be a not warm and fuzzy dude, and he certainly wasn't that to many, many people. Kalani there, kind of the same thing now, only he is warm and fuzzy, and people like that. And so he is rising to the top of his profession. And this might not be the last time somebody's going to come calling for him, because he's only 50 years old, right? He just turned 50 in October. He still has, and look at Kyle Whittingham, is 66 years older than the guy, or not 66, 16, being age 66. And he's got a fresh start. So look how many more years Kalani could coach if he wants. So that was the downside. Chris Hill always used to just roll with it, man, because he said, well, we're having a lot of success, so they're going to come calling for our guys. And in this particular case, Majerus, who never turned down an opportunity to talk to somebody, well, rather than just wallow in it, Chris, I don't want to say he thrived in it, but he accepted it, and he made the best of it. And he always had a list of guys that, should big man finally leave, and it came to that, of guys he would go after, right? And away they go. Now, they haven't reached the same level of success, so you could say, well, it hasn't panned out. Hopefully Alex can get it going there and for Utah basketball. I understand that. But from Kalani's standpoint, this is literally what you want from your program. You want guys other people to want your guys, because the only time they're going to want them is when they're having success. Now it's up to Santiago and the BYU people to do what they can. And I think that's what they're doing with Aaron Roderick. I mean, they're going to try to keep these guys. They're not just going to go back when it was Bronco leaving for Virginia. Tom Homo just basically threw up his hands and said, okay, away you go. I can't really do anything to match what you're going to have. Now I think they have these opportunities, not necessarily to match dollar for dollar, but to match situation for situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're not going to match dollar for dollar with some of these programs. But it is interesting, what kind of programs come calling for your people. And, the pecking order is different than it was when Chris Hill was worried about this 20, 25 years ago, whenever he started dropping those lines to us. Maybe it's more than that, actually, 30. Everything's in a different place. But in some regards, actually, Majerus is a good comparison because even though the Utes were in the WAC and then the Mountain West, Majerus had them elevated to be routinely a 2 and 3 seed. So it did the people who were attracted to hiring him, it was NBA teams in addition to top college programs. So that part of the puzzle maybe hasn't changed that much, as much as everything else in college sports is changing.
Because Majerus had some big-time programs after him. He could have, Pac-12 or Pac-10 back then, whatever he would have been interested in. Although they knew about him and word had gotten out, and let's face it, he had baggage, and so do you want that baggage and all that stuff? And I think he preferred a program that was a little off the radar, so when he built it up, he could get the credit, and he did obviously build up Utah. St. Louis, his health started to deteriorate, so you can't give it the same type of evaluation that he did at Utah. But I think that's what they're having here. And the Kyle situation, this is so crazy that we may never, ever see anything like this again. Or at least in a long time, to have this situation. It's so, you could make a movie out of it, man, and go back and forth. And still, it's only been a couple of days, but there's still some Utah people who are furious that this was handled the way it was handled and believe that Kyle still should be coaching at Utah, because clearly he wanted to continue to coach. And why wouldn't he want to continue to coach here if he didn't feel like his supervisors were okay with him leaving, or even to the point of not aggressively trying to get him to stay? Somewhere between okay with him leaving and not aggressively trying to get him to stay. You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I do.
That little gap that I created. And I've spoken to several people, and I'll be at the Vegas Bowl tomorrow, and I'll probably speak to more people who feel like, man, this should have never have happened.
And there's a strong argument, and it rarely, and we've talked about this so many times over the years, it rarely ends well with people who have a lot of celebrity and star power. And often when we say this, we talk about players, but we could both recite a long list of coaches. And Kyle even referenced this. Coaches, he's looked at it. He's a historian of the game. Coaches stayed a year or two too long. And you want to go out on a big note. I've been told, going through all of this, there's somebody who you think they'd know what they're talking about. And they're like, Kyle once said to them in the midst of the downtimes, maybe I should have gone out after the Rose Bowl, because he wanted to leave on a high note. It was important to him, and he came clean with that.
Yeah, but he did. He did leave on a high note.
He did.
Though.
He got back to that. Right. Yes.
They're a really good football team.
Yes. And yes. There's no doubt about it.
But it's still crazy.
But when he said that, he didn't say that right now. He said that in the midst of, I don't know, either the 8-5 or 5-7 is right. When he thought, well, maybe I should have gone out on that. And then he thought, no, I got to stick it out. I got to rebuild it and have a big year. And he did. And you still got this push-pull. And, this it certainly isn't as clean as a lot of people would have preferred.
Right.
But was it ever going to be? We talked about Kyle both on the air and off the air about him retiring because of specific things he said and specific things going on in his life. But the one thing that was always the constant in our discussions was don't get too far out on the limb, because all Kyle has to do is change his mind. And if you take him at 100% face value, and the people who love him and are sticking up for him right now, who think that the AD and the president pushed him out, they've got to acknowledge Kyle changes his mind. And that's pretty frustrating to manage. Now, you can say, he made him so much money. That's what you're paid for. Learn to manage it. Deal with it. I know I can find people who will say that, right?
Right. But there's no way that President Randall and Mark Harlan could anticipate a program the level of Michigan opening up the way it did. The timing was so freaking crazy. And then they've got younger guys that they pursue, and they're not going to go after the Miami of Ohio guy. And I don't know who he is, and he may be a great football coach, but they can't literally afford to do that. They're Michigan, right? So they go after DeBoer. They check that out. They go after Dillingham. They check that out. At least check it out to see what's available, right? And then they could say, Dillingham can say, well, they never offered me the job. Because that's not the way it is. They're not going to offer you the job unless you say yes. Because then they can say, well, we never offered him the job. And then Dillingham says, well, they never offered me the job. Right. But if Dillingham and his agent would have said, yeah, we're in, and maybe they do offer him the job. So they go through that. And then while they're going through that, this guy over here, who is the ultimate instability, and I wrote a piece in KSL Sports and KSL.com, Mr. Clean. And Michigan was, at the time, was Mr. Dirty. Right? And they still are. And he comes in with 20 years, and he's got Urban Meyer signing off on him, the arch enemy of Michigan. And Urban Meyer will praise Kyle up and down. He loves the guy, right? For his ability to coach football, and it's not a smokescreen, it's legitimate. And so they got all that stuff in there. And you're telling me that I got to hold the AD and the Utah president accountable for that? That seems a little outrageous.
Well, this all happens against a backdrop. I think it's like an old cartoon thing where one curtain opens and it reveals another curtain, and then that curtain opens and reveals another curtain. And the next curtain, instead of going out to the side of the stage, goes up and it reveals another curtain. There are multiple layers to this, and there's an elephant in the room that's getting talked about on social media, but not really a lot by the rest of us. Let's get to that next. We'll do it on the other side.
Oh, man. I was going to go to the bathroom. Now I'm going to stay right in my seat because I can't wait.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This is JJ and Alex. I got this.
I wonder what the next version of Utah football looks like, because I think that people think that it's going to be a one-to-one comparison between Morgan Scalley and Kyle Whittingham. Why is it not one-to-one, though?
They're not the same person. They're not the same personality.
Scalley's more fun? Is that what you'd say? The funner conversations I've ever had in my life between those two coaches is definitely Morgan Scalley, but he had a lot less on his plate.
Let me tell you about Morgan Scalley. The dude worked hard in the classroom. He worked hard in the field. He worked hard in everything he did. The dude just goes hard with everything he does, and nothing surprises me about where he is today. He's going to attack this job in a way that others don't because of the passion he has for the school and for the program. Morgan is totally 100% invested in Utah succeeding and Utah being great. He loves Utah, is my point. I think you get what I'm talking about. He's a Utah man.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 7 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Mr. Mack Utah County High School Player of the Week Award honors the top boys and girls prep basketball players each week. And the winners this week, Jalise Chapman from American Fork and Makai Allen from Provo High. Chapman scored 27 points in a 55-46 win over Provo, followed up with 26 points and win over Farmington. Allen had 23 points in the Bulldogs win at Grantsville, followed by 38 in a win over Morgan and 20 in a win over Richfield. The Utah County Players of the Week Award proudly presented by Mr. Mack. No one buys, no one sells, no one cares the way they do. Absolutely no one.
Nah, not a single person out there. I agree.
So, PK, the backdrop to all of this, you know, the Ute fans saying this should have never happened. Kyle should have gone out on his own terms. Morgan should have waited. If Morgan left, he could have come back. And if Morgan didn't come back, we could have gone and given the job to Jay Hill, and this should have never happened. You know, the background to all of this is there's the top layer of, okay, these are big names, celebrities, and personalities, and people are emotionally attached to them even if they've never met them. Yes. But there's also a lot of background here. I personally think, and I think you'll agree with this, but you can say whatever you want, I just think Mark Harlan has irritated a lot of people, and there are a lot of people out with knives for him. and they're not going to like anything he does. They don't like a bunch of stuff he has done. He's survived because football has won, and they've largely, made money and had the money to fund it. And you run the red, and if so, how long do you run in the red, and how much is the school willing to cover based on how much they get back? There's all that stuff. But you can argue his job is to make sure football wins and to keep the thing financially solvent. And he's done enough of that. There are people mad that basketball isn't better. There are people mad that he's let a lot of people who work behind the scenes who don't have the front-facing jobs. They've gone, and there have been NDAs signed, and people are upset about that. I think however this ended, unless it was super smooth, this was going to happen. There were going to be people complaining about it. I think you and I are going to hear complaints about Mark until the day he leaves, and then after he leaves, we'll probably still hear him anyway, regardless of how he leaves.
Yeah, that's where I think that this is a community that is slow to accept people from the outside. They're a little bit leery, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have anything to do, well, maybe not anything, but it goes beyond religion, right? Chris Hill wasn't an LDS, but he was accepted. I saw Chris Hill interact with church leadership. I actually saw it, and there was a mutual respect there, right? And the big thing, Chris Hill would never hire an LDS guy, blah, blah, blah. Well, he did. That was ridiculous. He's not going to spite himself. Kyle Whittingham fit that mold, right? So forget that. And Mark comes in as an outsider, and this community has trepidation, a little bit leery. How do you say it? To accept somebody from the outside. What are your intentions here?
I was the new guy for a very long time. I was stunned at how long people refer to, oh, you're the new guy. I'm like, I'm 3 years in. So things move slowly and change slowly here. And I think the town has changed since I showed up, obviously. But nonetheless, that's still out there. And Mark made a lot of changes pretty quickly. And they didn't sit well with a lot of people.
And I've always said this about you. You assimilated into this community smoothly and became a fabric. I joke about you and we have fun and all that stuff. But the fact is, you're a vital portion of the sports community, and you integrated. And, I don't want to get too dramatic here, but sports without David James is not going to be the same. I mean, the world will go on, obviously. Yes. But you're an example of an outsider coming into the community, working his way. Now, you didn't have the high profile position that he has and all that. I understand that, but it's pretty high profile now. And you worked your way through it and negotiated all the quirkiness and figured it out, and you're fine with it and you thrive here. And so with Mark coming in and then letting some people go that were beloved by the community, and I don't want to name names because I don't think they want their names out there, but we've spoken to them. Yep. And that's created a little bit of, hey, what's this guy about here? Now, to his credit, what is he, 8 years into it now? And maybe he is here for the long haul. Maybe in 10, 15 years, he'll still be here and doing his thing. It's a tough position. It's the old Stu Morrill line that he gave me when Roger Reed was fired. Every year, it seems like I pick up 10 more enemies. The longer I stay in this business, the more people don't like me. So being in a high profile where you have to make tough decisions, I'm trying to give Mark the benefit of the doubt, but I acknowledge everything that you say is accurate in the perception of him, and that's created this situation. I don't know if it could have been handled perfectly. I suppose they could have just stepped back and say, Kyle, do whatever you want, man. If you want to coach this next year, we're going to embrace you 100%. Our arm is around you. And if Morgan goes, that's not our concern right now. We'll worry about that if and when it happens. Our concern is winning the Big 12 in 26. That's the only thing we care about. And if you want to be the guy, we want you to be the guy. And my guess is, if that's just a guess, but my guess is if that were the scenario, he would still be the guy.
DJ PK, when we come back, Sean Callahan, publisher of Husker Online, part of On3.com. What? There's a football game coming up? Why weren't we notified? There's a bowl game? So distracted by all this other stuff. We'll talk with Sean Callahan about that, and also covering the Big Ten, his reaction or his thoughts on the reaction around the conference to Kyle Whittingham moving to Michigan. That's coming up next. Stay with us.